Hello, listeners. Here I am going to discuss one of the most talked about poems by the Romantic movement poet William Wordsworth. The world is too much with us. The poem is a sonnet and, as such, is of 14 lines. As with basic tenets of Romanticism, the poet is critical of the mechanical advancements of the first industrial revolution because of the enormous increase in the materialistic ways of life and the gradual disconnect with nature, an entity very dear to the Romantics. So it is a poem based on the romantic movement, and romanticism was an artistic, literary and intellectual movement that originated in Europe towards the end of the 18th century, and in most areas it was continued till the later years of the 19th century. So basically what romanticism holds is a deep regard for two things: individual imagination and intuition, or you can also say emotions. So, individual imagination, individual thinking, individual emotions, and passions, and thinking minds. That is what is very crucial to romanticism. Romanticism stands for that, and also love for nature is one of the very important themes of the romantic era. So nature and imagination are the watchwords of romantic poetry, you can say that. So as we all know, we are facing perhaps the most crucial times in the history of the modern man, and according to that, this poem is very opportune because it hits right at the fiery topic which has been the subject of debate and discussion shortly after the pandemic took over the human world. That issue is of the natural environment and man's interaction with the same for over decades, with absolute disregard or saddening disregard for the natural world and other living organisms. The poem is written in iambic pentameter. It is like most other Petrarchan sonnets. It is written in iambic pentameter, which is a particular writing form in poetry in which an iamb is a foot which consists of an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable, or a short syllable followed by a long syllable. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? So there is alternate stressed and unstressed syllables are being alternated. Firstly, there is an unstressed syllable and it is immediately followed by a stressed syllable. That is what is happening in the lines of the poem. So that is what it is. And pentameter is simply penta, which means 5 meters. So a line of poetry written in pentameter has 5 feet, or 5 stressed sets of stressed syllables followed by unstressed syllables. In basic iambic pentameter, a line would have 5 feet of iambs, which is an unstressed and then a stressed syllable. So that is what happens. So the poem is very much in the center of what human beings have been up to and where this is leading them. All right. Beginning with the poem, we should read the first two lines. The world is too much with us, late and soon. Getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. So, all right, this is the octave that has begun in the sonnet. Octave is the first set of 8 lines that creates or develops the problem. For just a basic background, let's see what's happening in the poem. So, the speaker in the poem blames the modern civilization of being in total disconnect with nature and simply lost in the pursuit of material goals, or earning and stocking as much resources as possible, even to the extent of overburdening the planet and its flora and fauna. Man is wasting the natural powers and instincts that ancient civilizations used to have, and it seems humans have sold their hearts to materialistic pursuits. Even when the natural world has given persistent hints, such as the seas rising up to the moon and roaring and howling winds, among others, man is unable to comprehend their distress and is out of tune with the natural world. That is what is happening here. So, little we see in nature that is ours, we have given our hearts away a sordid boon. Man has traded his heart for material gains. This sea that bears her bosom to the moon, the winds that will be howling at all hours, and are upgathered now like sleeping flowers. For this, for everything, we are out of tune. So man is out of tune. Man is out of tune with all the natural processes that are happening, which the speaker in the poem can realize standing up on a meadow. He is standing up on a meadow and looking at the tumultuous sea, which is now at perhaps it is the night time, as he says. So the seas are calm and are like sleeping flowers. But through all the natural imagery, he is trying to show that he has a sort of connect with nature. He feels a deep connection with nature, which unfortunately the modern human civilization has lost touch of. Being a thorough romantic, the speaker is dejected to be a part of such an uncaring civilization and would rather be a pagan, he says. So for this, for everything we are out of tune, it moves us not. All the natural scene, because it is not, it cannot be commodified. Nature cannot be commodified, and you cannot reap benefits, directly out of it. So you do not give much concern about its state, and that is what is a true fact. Great God, I'd rather be a pagan suckled in a creed outworn. Now the sestet begins. Now the second part of the poem, sestet, where the solution to that problem has been given. What the solution that he gives for the problem is that he would rather be a pagan suckled in a creed outworn. So might I, standing on this pleasant lea, have glimpses that would make me less fallen. Okay, this current scenario is very dejected, very sad, very distressing. Human beings have been thoroughly unfair to the natural world and to all the organisms living on the face of the earth. But I would rather choose not to be so forlorn, not to be so lonely and sad. Fallen means that I would choose to be a pagan. So, what that means is that he would rather be. Pagan is a term for people whose religious beliefs are outdated and primitive, and not in one of the religious beliefs of the modern man or the modern established religions of the world. So he would be a pagan and have more connection with the natural scene as the people of earlier ages did, so that he is in unison with the natural environment and feels comfort at the sight of the sea. He wishes, in other words, to experience those ancient times of serenity when a human being was more in touch with nature and life was not as complex and numbing as it has become. And imagine this was written more than 2 centuries ago, around 1800s, and what all has gone by since then, and the amount of stress we have exerted on the resources of the earth, that we are facing several backlashes, with the most current one being the pandemic that has caused the world to literally shut down. So try to make sense of what being talked about here, how long it has been since we have really took time out to appreciate nature and our immediate surroundings. That is all that you need to think after reading this poem. Now let's move to a line by line analysis of the poem. Again, let's begin with the lines again. So in the first two lines, he directly blames the world, saying that people have been engaged in getting and spending, purchasing and selling. All right, the world is too much with us, late and soon. Getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. Purchasing and selling, commodification is rampant, and he describes that human race is rapidly consumed by the growing consumerism or by the growing commodification of life, and therefore the world is too much or too much to bear for whom there are different perspectives for what is the sense of the title. The world is too much with us. So the world can be too much for a lot of different people and a lot of different perspectives. Firstly, it can be for the romantic temperament people. For them, the social world, the world that is outside, the general people, the general public, or the modern society is too much to bear. Then it could be natural world that is too overwhelming for the society to bear, for people to be paying any attention to it, as nature cannot be commodified and so human beings cannot relate to it. It may also mean that the social world is a burden on the natural world. God has given human beings a lot of potential, but they are wasting their faculties in the material pursuits. So it can have various interpretations. In third and fourth lines, he says, little we see in nature that is ours. We have given our hearts away, a sordid boon. So as a result, humans are unable to associate with nature. Nature is personified here. what humans have done is basically made their entire living a trade exercise. They have given their heart and soul to uh, chasing material wealth, and this is like a sordid boon or a cheap, debased benefit. In other words, humans have no higher purpose. So, naturally, when these things are happening, the events in the natural world and the serenity of nature both have lost all context for human beings. The sea has been personified as a woman who restlessly bears her bosom to the moon. Alright, the sea that bears her bosom to the moon, the winds that will be howling at all hours and are upgathered now like sleeping flowers. For this, for everything, we are out of tune. It moves us not. So, the sea has been personified as a woman, and it gushes towards the moon as if in great unrest. There are winds that continuously howl at several intervals and have subdued for the time being as the speaker watches the natural scene from the meadows. Basically, the human beings are out of touch with all natural processes and indications from the environment that the human intervention has been detrimental on nature. It has remained unchecked for long and does not concern them much. They do not bother much about nature as such, so it does not move them, and so the speaker cannot be a part of such a derangement. You should also note the various figures of speech that are being used in the poem, be it personification such as of nature, of the sea. It has been personified as a woman, great god, all that. And also there is enjambment that is being used in the ninth line, where he says, great god, I'd rather be a pagan sucked in a creed out one. The thought has been continued. Enjambment is a poetic device in which a thought is continued from one line to the other without completion of the sense in the one sentence. So the sentence continues in two lines. I'd rather be a pagan suckled in a creed out one. So after be, the sentence does not end. The meaning carries forward to the next line. So notice the enjambment there. He then appeals to a god, probably Christian god, and expresses his wish that he'd rather be a pagan who, like ancient peasantry, worships a primitive natural deity, and he wishes to be nursed on those natural elements that make him feel more alive. Pagans had their own mythology and had much regard for nature. That is what he yearns for. Then he makes a wish that if he could be a pagan, he can stand on the meadow and witness the natural world and the sea waves rising and falling and feel less lonely and dejected. He also expresses hope that maybe after spending some time aloof in nature, he may see Proteus, the Greek god of sea, who is known for his prophecies but usually avoids doing so by changing shapes into various forms. He is also said to be the son of Poseidon, the Greek god, and is the brother of another sea god, Triton, whom too the speaker wishes to see as he blows his twisted or wreathed horn to calm the waves. So might I, standing on the pleasantly, have glimpses that would make me less forlorn, have sight of Proteus rising from the sea, or hear old Triton blow his wreathed horn. This is all that gives him peace. This sense of antiquity, the sense of, you know, being in the company of nature, pure and simple nature. That is what gives him peace. And then he says he wishes to return to the ancient world of regard for nature and be a part of all the natural processes that provide distinct peace and contentment to the senses. Now, the themes as we see in this poem are basically, firstly, a criticism of the materialistic world and man's relentless pursuit of, you know, commodification of life and everything. Then second, loss of connect with natural elements and nature itself, and also somewhere a serenity and bountiful influence of nature is also an underlying theme. So the theme is very well manifested by the structure of the poem also. As you can see, the octave develops the problem and the sestet solves it. Plus there is also what is the problem? The problem is excessive materialization of human beings, or excessive material pursuits of human beings even at the expense of nature. And the solution is that, at least in our own ways, or as the speaker does in the poem, we should be as closer to nature as possible, and we should try to connect as much with nature as is possible for us. The rhyme scheme also, showcases the theme of the poem very well. It is A B A B C D C D C D. This repeating rhyme scheme hints at the monotonous repetition of modern life's mundane activities. So that is what it is all about. So basically, in a nutshell, what you should be studying in this poem or about this poem is basically the romantic movement, which includes the time period from the late 18th century to around the late 19th century, which and also that this movement emerged as a reaction to Enlightenment era, which emphasized reason and logic and dominated much of European philosophy back then. And whereas romantic poetry had to do with emotions and feelings, the romantics valued emotions, feelings, passions, and individuality. So that is what you need to see. The basic thing with romantics is that they value first emotions and second individuality. That is what was at the center of their philosophy. Wordsworth belongs to a group which is also known as the Lake Poets. Lake Poets were the poet during the late 1700s and early 1800s, which included also S.T. Coleridge and Robert Southey. These were poets who lived in the Lake District in England, and they had much regard for nature above all else. So that is why their poetry has to do with nature most of the time. So this is it, and now you must realize how current this poem is, and the field of literature and environment in general has become very, very crucial now. We are facing times which could never have been imagined, and while we are restricted, nature is healing, the earth is rejoicing, pollution levels have hit an all time low, and air is clean and fresh as if the world has suddenly turned to the early Middle Ages of relatively no mechanization. So, this is it, and the central concerns of this poem is that being as away from materialism as possible should be the goal of our lives. Reconnection with nature is also a concern. Then people destroying themselves with consumerism in the rat race of development. They are ignoring the concerns of nature. That is what's also crucial. There is nature both active and healing in the poem, and also very violent and revolting nature, which is also in the current scenario you can relate to much of it. Also, there is both remorse and dissatisfaction in the poem towards man materialistic inclination. Man's inclinations of stalking and hoarding, and becoming a successful worldly man, a social world man, rather than a man connected to his roots and man connected to nature. So that is what this poem is all about. Next we shall discuss in the next lecture, and till then stay safe and think on this poem. Thank you.